I would like to first welcome our first speaker, Teemu Kurkela. He's an architect and a true classic sailor. So, welcome, Teemu. And here is a mic, and time starts going, and it will be coming automatically.
Doesn't work. No. Okay. So this is my boat, Ursula, from 1922. This is the only boat that was designed and built in Finland in this class. And actually, you were supposed to say that I'm a bad sailor.
Sorry. Do you see the pictures there? So
yes, okay. This is actually, yeah, and I'm an architect, so I forgot what I was supposed to speak about when Esko called me. So the idea is to speak about lessons of beauty, actually, from sailing to architecture and generally in life. So this is one building made of steel, actually, and I didn't do it consciously. So this is the first trip, actually, when I started sailing when I was 35, and my girlfriend bought a boat from Stockholm, and then I went from there and started right away from zero. And you can imagine what happened. We came across the sea. And what I was not told that I would become a carpenter. But actually, the truth is that I would look like a carpenter, but I was not able to do anything except for varnishing. And I think I'm a pretty good varnishing person. So that I have learned. So it's quite beautiful. And in the beginning, we used to call all these ropes hamsters because we didn't really know which one is which one. And that maybe even for 5 years that went on, and we were thinking that the boat is really slow. And then this is a Shanghai pavilion in Shanghai Expo, the Finland pavilion, and also somehow is based on the technology of sailing. And so it's somehow, I have a lot of time to think about something else since I'm not really so focused on sailing. And I think the key idea in this, my relationship to sailing is that this is a very cheap summer house in the center of Helsinki. It's only like 300 meters from my home, and I go there and really enjoy it. And now we're working on this project in Dubai. It's about structures, and I think everything is somehow connected, that you are thinking about beautiful structures, and I think the most beautiful structures are in the boats, actually, because you are structurally, they seem to be like half the size. And the other thing that I've learned is a beautiful lifestyle of KonMari, that you don't really have any stuff inside the boat. And I think I'm trying to push that further, that even less and less. So this is, I think, really good for your life. And then there's lots of material, there's lots of lessons about the beauty of using wood and how do you use the wood in many different ways. So we use the woods in the buildings, and there's, let's say, over the years you think about the use of wood and what to do with it, like all the time. And then there's, when you sleep in the boat, there's a skylight in my boat, and then there's even more time to think about important things, that what is the meaning of life, for instance. There's a fire, there's like a thunderstorm outside. And then, of course, with Ilkka, we tried to make a design also a cruise ship. And actually, I've even been to Florida to discuss about cruise ship design, but then they selected somebody else. But I think we had the best design. This is, there's a lot of also learning lessons about history. This is the guy who commissioned the boat, and his story about his first trip when in the book was when the boat was launched. And I think even then there was a certain lifestyle connected to this sailing. Very healthy lifestyle that is not all about whiskey or drinking. I think it is you can see that there's something going on in the 1930s. And then, of course, this is a cultural heritage, and then they had some sailing life. Then they met the neighbors. Some of you might recognize this guy, their neighbor. So everything is connected somehow. Yes, I don't know if he went to the boat. Actually, then there was a disaster. The mast was burned, and I realized that what should I do? I first made a mistake, but then I realized that first thing to do is to call the best designer, because I'm an architect. And I of course knew that Julian Hempel would design the new mast. And the second thing to do is to buy the fish, so to say. So to call John, who I've actually never met you, but I just called you and I said that, okay, I want to buy the wood, the raw material. And then Julian told me that it makes sense to make the metal parts of bronze. And actually this is in connection to Esko said that I can't take a picture of your boat because your boom is so ugly. So I think now I don't have that problem anymore. So it's a really, Ventis built a mast in Holland, and they did really a great job. But mostly then there's lessons of friendship, for instance, that you need a lot of friends to be able to sail this boat. I can't do it alone, so I have to keep some friendships. And I think that the last thing, what I'm trying to do is that eventually I will learn to sail. But I think that since I started when I was 35, so I still, in terms of years, I think I have, it takes me longer. So thank you.
Thank you. Tässä voi sysyttää. Thank you, Teemu. Thank you, Teemu. That was awesome. We learned quite a lot. And yeah, you said that you are a bad sailor. I was supposed to say that. Next one we have Ilkka Suppanen. He's a well-known designer and also enthusiastic sailor. Join us, Ilkka. Voit katsoa tonne noin, niin sä näet sen.
I was supposed to speak about form and function, and these are functional objects, but they all have different form. And in one way, it is a question of beauty. Somebody decides to do the tools in a different way. Otherwise, they would be all the same, like in a boat. If it is all the combination of a same need, they would all end up being the same. So there's the aspect of beauty, which is somehow big part of things in the sea. And what it is interesting is that boats are also like a tools. Boats can be used for for the whole day, move things around. Then it can be for racing, as you know, or it can be a pleasure boat or pleasure yacht. So the meaning of yacht changes over the time, but never I have seen a pleasure craft becoming a racing yacht. So there is a certain kind of procedure on the meaning of the yacht. The sailing boat is in one way and kind of a dynamic situation between different natural forces. There is the hydrodynamic, there's aerodynamic, and there's the gravitation, which is all the forces of nature which you can somehow dynamically manipulate to create speed. Both has kind of two different kind of spaces, the two categories of spaces. There is the interior space, which by nature is limited and it is very small. Then there is another space, which is the exterior space, which at least from the psychological point of view, it's infinite. It is something like this. And therefore, in one way, yacht has these two kind of spatial entities which define the space. The interior of a yacht is like a miniature home. But of course, as you know, it has all the same elements as you have it in a home, but you have a dynamic situation which is completely different. You have the boat leading, you have a pitch and roll. The beauty, the sailing or yacht is a backdrop as well. It is a backdrop of a beauty over the time. You know, there has always been this kind of you see a sail in the sea, people say this is something beautiful, even though it is functional. Luckily, this idea of a backdrop for beauty has changed over the time, and nowadays it is still somehow very, very relevant aesthetic expression of beauty. The interesting thing about the interior space of a boat is that in one way of yacht, it is that it is so much more closer to aircraft or space station than it is actually to the home. It is very similar nowadays. The kind of a dynamic situation of a boat, which have all kind of forces interplaying with to creating the speed is in one way interesting because it is based on a balance. It is based on the balance of several kind of dynamic forces. And the speed is created out of the kind of interplay and manipulation of these forces into the right direction, regardless of time and of yacht. I don't see what I have written. I should be. Basically, the computers have helped us a lot because with the simulation models, we can now calculate and understand kind of these forces much more greater way, that this kind of balance can lead into the speed. And because basically, if you think about the aesthetics or the beauty of sailing, the speed is beauty. It is a beautiful thing to go fast with the kind of natural forces. What is interesting for me is also the cultural aspect of beauty in a boat. If you think about yachting, yachting is basically kind of started probably in Netherlands or Great Britain or United States. And in somehow, even today, even you use very advanced technologies, the yachts from these countries and from these origins still have the idea of classical traditional aesthetics. And at the same time, if you think about the countries like France or Germany or especially Italy, somehow there the yacht design and the idea of beauty has much more advanced and avant-garde connotations. I think now the slides go a little bit in the wrong way. I think it's back to another one. And then I am very honored to be here because of this situation, and especially that we have one of a designer I admire a lot, Pelle Pettersson, among us. And what I was thinking that in one way Pelle Pettersson represents the Scandinavian model of design and yacht design, different from the kind of a classical Dutch, English, American, or the radical French, German and Italian system. And his yacht, which is mixer, it was kind of called executive competition, was a very beautiful yacht in one way, interestingly combining the function and the beauty. Probably at the time, this yacht was quite much, came too early, and we wouldn't respect at the time as much as it should be respected today, even though its name. I think we are all here because of Mr. Esko Kilpi, and I am so thankful for him to organizing this and him being with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ilkka. Thank you, Ilkka. Next one we will have back into the helmet section. So we will hear more about the, for sure, about the foiling. We have a naval architect, Miikka Pennanen. Welcome.
Thank you. So, dear sailors, dear friends, this is not my presentation. This is somebody else. This is Oskari's. I think we'll rather maybe change on the fly. This is my presentation. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about yacht technology development, pushing boundaries within it, and look a little bit into how ideas are created and how we're rotating and recycling really during the years. Different technological ideas, how they come again, how they go, and what we can reuse. So my name is Miikka Pennanen, I'm a naval architect. I have my background in competitive sailing, in skiffs, 29 and 49 and Moth. I've had the privilege to study in Southampton and Chalmers and learn from some of the great designers, Lars Larsson's Pelle's colleague and others. But now a few years ago we started a company with my colleague Eric Smits, sitting over there. We are currently focusing mostly on hydrofoils, so we make world-class hydrofoils and hydrofoil control systems. Compared to the NACRA, we don't make unstable systems which are impossible to sail. We try to make systems which are very possible to sail. So this represents technology of today. Well, this is already a few years ago, but built by myself and Eric. And here we see something that is actually not a very new idea. It's hydrofoiling, and it's based actually on beautiful small forces, not large forces. Well, here we have something from the beginning of the 20th century, when yacht design was based on a lot of sail and long water lines. So waterline length is basically the limiting factor of speed of a floating boat. Similarly, we had in Sweden, we had, and elsewhere as well, that the Skerry cruisers used to be a class where sail area was limited, and so the waterline length, which was basically the limiting factor of speed, was stretched and stretched as much as possible, and the boats came really slender, really beautiful. I had a Skerry cruiser along for myself, but they were still limited with that, with all the weight to the waterline length. The skiffs, 18-foot skiffs in Australia, represent something else. So they made this huge writing moment with the acrobatic performances, and then they had a planing hull. So that's another way of pushing boundaries. Well, an even better way is, of course, to get rid of all the drag. Basically, in an ice yacht, we only have friction. In the 1930s, the DN yacht, ice yacht came along. This is not the DN. This is another one. But basically, those boats are able to reach massive speeds, and we can see something similar happening today with foiling. This is 1954. Baker Brothers and the US Navy together developed this yacht, which is a predecessor of the current America's Cup boat. We have a monohull boat with foils on both sides, just like this, and a T-foil, or probably U-foil in this case, in the back. Well, ideas are recycled, and slingshots. Kuchen brothers in the 80s and the Harkin boys built this massive speed machine, also again based on acrobatics and basically taking guys out on a massive outrigger to create righting moments and to be able to turn the wind force into force forward. Kotaro Horiuchi and Mr. Ketterman in the States and Japan developed the previous America's Cup configuration, so that was a catamaran with airfoils on either side in the 80s. So this is actually what we saw in the previous America's Cup. But many people probably didn't realize it was made already. The Aussies keep on pushing with the crazy skiffs and their acrobatics, the boats harder and harder, and here we see, well, something outrageous, really. Quite something, and this concept, of course, now combined with foils later on is something quite interesting. Well, here we have something really interesting. So boundaries are pushed. We have there a foil on the left and a wing on the right. The idea here is that the foil is actually pushing down, and exactly opposite force we have in the wing, which pulls up or forward and up. And these forces, when one grows, the other one grows. And there is no limit to speed, really. That boat went 68 knots, but if the other force disappears, things go bananas. That's what happened to Paul Larsen here a few years ago. I don't remember the exact, this is not a long time ago. Must be like 2010 or something similar. I don't know, maybe this is the next step of sailing. I don't know if we really need to be attached anymore to water. So if we have a foil that is actually pulling us down and holding us down in the water, so could we maybe produce that force somehow in another way, or are we just getting really close to sail planes and flying? Let's see if we're touching the water anymore soon. So Kotaro Horiuchi and Mr. Ketterman designed these yachts in the 80s, and now in the previous America's Cup they were refined a little bit with nice L foils and T foils in the back. Definitely boundaries were pushed here with wing sails, which were also a further development from the 1988 America's Cup with Stars and Stripes. And now we have reached, again, the 1954 design from the Baker brothers, and surprisingly, this foil looks very much like Eric and my foil from 2 years ago. Very good. Let's see what happens with yachting and with sailing in the future when the kids get into these boats. This is an open big, so this is a new picture. We have foiling boats now for kids. This is maybe the first relevant sort of, this is a big class worldwide. Non-foiling though, but you can buy a foiling kit. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the new generation is going to see sailing as a different kind of sport than what we see it, anybody of us. This is the latest development of Team New Zealand, their development boat, scaled down America's Cup, AC-72. So it's really interesting how ideas are recycled and the new and old combines, and it's really beautiful to see some of the old prevailing, and that we see in this beautiful picture with one of the most lively classes in Finland, the 6 medium. Beautiful picture by Olli. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Miikka. Next one we have junior world champion in Finn class. We'll hear more about speed and strength. Please, Oskari Muhonen.
Thank you. All right, so yeah, as said, I'm Oskari Muhonen. I've been sailing Finn for now 3-4 years, and a lot of dinghies before, and I thought it would be nice to tell you about the downwind sailing and the joy that downwind sailing brings, at least for all dinghy sailors, but I hope for all of you as well. So yeah. And for me, really the joy is about all the different aspects of the downwind sailing, because it depends a lot about the wind and the waves, so it's never the same. And if we start with the light winds, it's like A lot about the feeling of the boat. You try to feel the pressure on the sheet and find the perfect angle where you have the most power on the sail. And you can, when you find the perfect angle, you can really like feel the boat accelerating, and you can even hear the boat going faster on top of the water when it makes more noise. And then you can use the speed to get closer to the mark, and then do it all over again. And yeah, it's like the light winds, it's all about the small movements and the feeling and this sort of stuff. And when the wave starts to get bigger and the wind picks up, of course, you want to use the waves. And the unique thing about the fin sailing is that we have the free pumping rule. So above 10 knots, you're allowed to pump as much as you want and use your body on the downwind to make the boat go faster. So what happens then is that all the big guys want to get as much energy into the boat as possible. So then you end up with pumping the sheet and healing the boat to make the boat go faster and accelerate really a lot. You can see here on the picture, you're just like healing leeward and then pulling the boat up to make the boat go faster. And then you also need to time it with the waves, because obviously you want to use the waves to get a bit of surfing and more speed with the waves. So it's like all about the timing and the force you put into the boat. And this is really the physical side of the fin sailing compared to all the other like Olympic classes or youth classes. Because at the end of the run, you can easily have heartbeat up to like 190, 200 heartbeats per minute. And actually my colleague that retired this autumn, Tapio Nirkko, used to always tell me that, like, I think he had all his top heart rates because he always used to wear like heart rate monitor. So he always used to have bigger heart rate on the water than on the exercises on land. So that really tells about the physical aspect. And then on the upwind, it doesn't get much easier. So yeah, like the free pumping conditions are really the most physical what you can find, I guess, in the whole Olympic classes. But then when we get a bit more wind, the boat starts to go faster and the waves start to be bigger. So then the advantage of the pumping starts to be a bit smaller because the boat is already going so fast. So then you just want to find the surfs and use the waves to get as fast as possible. And it's sort of it is sort of a dance with the waves because you're moving a lot in the boat. You're trying to have perfect heel on the boat and steer it to the waves and pump at the right time to get the wave. And then use the wave, like surf as long as possible and as fast as possible. So while you're surfing, you can still steer a bit and try to make the speed with the steering and try to aim like the steepest spot of the wave to make the boat go faster. And for me, like the actual surfing part, that's probably the best feeling you can get while surfing, while sailing. It's almost like surfing with the surfboard, because when the boat accelerates, there's less pressure on the sail. So then it's really about how to make the boat go down on the wave. But then when the breeze builds up even more, it starts to be a bit like survival conditions, as sailors would say it. So the boat starts to be really fast. So fin is not like planing boat, but when it's above 20 knots, it's planing almost all the time on the downwind. So the downwinds go really fast. So there's small gains, or not really that big gains. And you just want to be honest, keep the boat upright position. So that's a bit closer to the light wind sailing again, because then you just want to find the pressure angle again and have like small movements in the boat because it's so unstable, and then get to the back of the boat and maybe put your feet underneath the hiking straps and try to steer accurately in order to not to capsize. And the next picture is about what happens when you don't get the steering right. And this actual day was in Australia a few weeks ago, and after we were capsizing all the time with my training partners, and the coach said that after the sailing that maybe you guys should apply for the national swimming team instead. But yeah, and this last picture, I was going through the pictures on my computer and found this one, and couldn't resist to put this one as the last picture. I guess that's not how the warrior life jacket or something. All right, hope you enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you. Kiitos. Okay, and next one we are going a bit more, I would say, probably the most coldest way of sailing, but also the fastest way of sailing. Our 6 Meter Association chairman, Ossi Paija.
Thank you all. All right. I know most of you, and I've been sailing a long time in the 6 meters and the sharks and so forth. And at some point, I started thinking that I really want to sail in the winter as well. And I was thinking about Nice and maybe Cannes and sail with the dragons. And then one time I was sitting in one of the yacht clubs, and I was with Johnny that time, and they told me that no, you got to get one of these ice sailing things, like a DN. I was like asking, like, so what is that? You just buy it. You just buy it, and you try it, you're gonna love it. It's fantastic. It's the greatest thing you can do. So there I was. I bought a DN. This is not me. This is actually a 6 Meter sailor, another one. And the first thing was that I was putting on the gear, the blades. I didn't know anything about, and it was a hurry. There's a start in an hour, so it was setting up the mast, putting it as fast as possible. And basically jumping to the boat, and okay, I've sensed it for like 5-10 minutes, and then my friend was helping me that, okay, here's this kind of a line, like you put the boat over that, and then there's the start in 5 minutes. So this was literally the way I started with the sport. I didn't have any idea what the hell I'm gonna do. And at some point I started to understand. There's a lot of technology involved. There's a lot of blades. You basically need like 20 different sets of blades, like Johnny told me. And then on top of that, you need them all in different sorts of material. So there's an endless amount of technology that goes into it. I have now like 3 sets of blades, and I only used one of them. And I've been pretty happy with that. Okay, so the boat is like, it cost like a new boat is like 7,000 euros. You can get the old one for 2.5, but then you can spend a lot on the blades. We're talking about 20,000 or 30,000 on the blades. It's also about, it's a sport, we are actually having helmets on, and sometimes, you need the helmet. It's good to have it. I've seen a couple of accidents. Nothing ever happened seriously, but there's like 50 boats in the track at the same time, and they're all going 100 kilometers an hour. So it makes sense to have a helmet. So this was the moment when I was like thinking like, okay, what should I do? And Kara told me that, okay, you just wait here, and then they tell you to go, and then you run, and basically jump to the boat. So there I was, kind of like waiting, like what's going to happen, and kind of like being prepared, and having I had like these spiked shoes on, like everybody else, and basically I sense that, I'm not a good runner, and you have these guys next to you who are like jumping 2 meters, and they look like they are in like these sort of quite slim fit kind of things. And I thought this sport was supposed to be like impossible in the first place. Like it should be like something that, you try to sail on the ice, but it's not actually possible. But it is actually like a fully blown sport. And these guys are taking it seriously. And I was like amazed, like, okay, what's gonna happen? So there we were, waiting for the start. It's beautiful, by the way. You have 40 boats, 50 boats next to each other, all lined up. And it's the adrenaline, you're waiting for it, and then they say, go. And you start running and slipping, and you go on the wrong side of the board and it hurts you. But then you start getting it after a few times, and then you jump on board. The first thing is to, of course, scratch your boat with your spikes, and you break it, but you kind of like learn as you go. And finally, I remember it was this spring, there was no winter, right? So at one point, I realized that I got it. I got the perfect start. But it took me like maybe 100 times before I got it. But then, I felt that, now I'm going fast. But okay, then you have the boats in the water. They're all going same direction, and they're going fast. And the speed is just going up and up and up, and the mast starts to bend. And, you are like, actually you don't sense it that much even, so you're so close to the ice. And then you get the first upwind mark, and actually the funny thing is that you're going fast as hell already, but then you just start to go even faster. And the speeds are just going higher and higher. You are all of a sudden going 100 kilometers an hour. And then you come to the downwind mark. And now that's the tricky part. That's really the tricky part, because you can't turn 100 kilometers an hour on the ice. So somehow you have to start to find a way to lose your speed, reduce the speed, and then come up. And after time and time practice, you start getting it. But you can see you have a lot of these white tracks there. Those didn't make it. They slipped, they lost the speed. And even in the next picture you can see there's actually a very, very good sailor here. You can see that he's sliding on the side. And that's when you lose it. And that's frustrating, because everybody's going like a bullet past you, and you're just waiting for getting the wind again. And the funny thing was that after 1.5 years sailing this sport, I also realized that actually at some point you have to look at the sail and actually sail the boat. And it kind of like helps in the acceleration. But it is fantastic sport, a lot of beautiful views. I recommend it to all of you to try it. Thank you.
Kiitos.